Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to travel back in time to the year 79 AD, to the Roman city of Pompeii. In this video, I'll set the scene for you, describing what you would have seen, heard, and even smelled if you had somehow managed to teleport yourself back to this lost city just days before its destruction by the eruption of nearby Mount Vesuvius. I'll be doing my best Roman accent for the occasion, but fair warning, it may not be very good. So strap in and get ready for our time travel adventure. And remember, at the end of the video, I will share the artistic prompt that will allow you to create your own realistic depiction of ancient Rome using free AI tools, so stay tuned for that. It's early morning in the city of Pompeii, which is located near the Bay of Naples in the Roman province of Pompeii. The year is 79 AD. Behind me is the imposing Mount Vesuvius, home to the gods according to the locals. Though its slopes may appear tranquil and serene right now, it has a violent side, which we shall see later. But for now, let us focus on the city below, which appears quite typical of any other Roman city at first glance. We have grand public buildings constructed from white marble, statues of Roman emperors, and all around us are the trappings of Roman culture and daily life. However, upon closer inspection, one can see that Pompeii is actually quite different from any other Roman city. Here, classical Roman culture blends seamlessly with the culture of the native Oscan people who inhabited this area prior to the Roman conquest. And so, here in Pompeii, you will find temples dedicated to both the Capitoline Triad, Jupiter, Mars, and Minerva, as well as local Oscan deities such as Nile. In fact, Oscan is still widely spoken here and Latin is rarely heard. This region is one of the most prosperous in all of Italy due to its fertile soil, mild climate, and strategic location on the Mediterranean Sea. Agriculture is a primary source of income for many of the citizens of Pompeii, though fishing, glassmaking, blacksmithing, and other trades are also common. Most of the city's food is imported from elsewhere in Italy, however, including grain from Sicily and Africa, fish from the Balearic Islands, marble from Greece, and silver from Spain. In exchange, Pompeian wine, garum, and dried fruit are shipped throughout the Mediterranean. I'm standing now on the north side of the city, facing the Forum. The Forum is surrounded by government and judicial buildings, as well as temples to the gods. Across from me stands the massive basilica, a large rectangular building with a flat roof used for judicial and commercial purposes. The atrium beyond it is the center of civic life, where important notices are posted and political speeches are given. To the east of the Forum is the Court of the Magistrates, while to the west is the Temple of Apollo. Nearby is the large amphitheater, which can hold up to 20,000 spectators and where gladiatorial combats, wild animal hunts, and executions are held. At the southern end of the Forum, we begin to hear the sounds of vendors setting up shop for the day. A middle-aged woman calls out to potential customers, loudly advertising the wares of her stall. Nearby, a baker pulls his goods out of his shop, including loaves of bread, pastries, and cakes, all made with the finest imported flour and sweetened with exotic fruits from far-off lands. Next to him, a merchant lays out his colorful collection of fabrics, surely woven by slaves in some far-off eastern land. Further down the road, we see a money changer counting out a customer's change after having converted their denarii into the smaller copper coins that are more practical for everyday transactions. A few paces away, a wine merchant is busy decanting his wares into smaller vessels. His shop is filled with barrels of Pompeian Falernian wine, said to be some of the finest in all of Italy. A group of young men pass by, laughing and joking as they walk. They're all at the finest age, with the toga of a Roman youth about their shoulders, looking very handsome in the morning light. One of them wears expensive perfume, no doubt imported from Egypt or Greece. Their sandals are made of fine leather, and their hair has been carefully styled. They make their way through the bustling crowd without a care in the world. We now find ourselves on the Via dell'Abbondanza, the main street of the city, which is lined with shops on both sides. Here we meet Titus, a former slave who has recently purchased his freedom. He owns a small shop selling household goods. He greets his regular customers by name and chats with them about their families while they browse his wares. Many of his customers are wealthy Romans, but he also counts many of the local Oscan people among his clientele. Just down the street, we hear the rhythmic clang of a hammer on steel. It is Marcus, a skilled blacksmith whose specialty is making horseshoes. He is an ex-slave too, and he takes pride in his work. Some of the richest men in town commission him to make custom ironwork for their houses. We pass by the house of a wealthy Slaves hurry to complete their master's breakfast. They pour wine into a silver goblet and place it into the hands of a sleeping man. It's too early in the morning for him to rise, so they wake his wife instead. She dresses quickly and joins her husband in bed. After a brief moment of intimacy, she leaves to attend to her duties. As the wife walks away, we catch a glimpse of the luxurious interior of her house. The walls are decorated with frescoes depicting scenes from Greek mythology, and furniture made of cedar wood and ivory can be seen throughout the room. Now we find ourselves in the amphitheater. Two men are locked in combat, each trying to best the other with their sword. The crowd cheers wildly as the fight rages back and forth. Suddenly, one of the men falls to the ground, mortally wounded. The victor raises his sword in the air and the crowd goes wild. This is a typical spectacle here in Pompeii, where men fight to the death for the amusement of the crowd. But there are also fights between men and beasts, between men and chariots, and even fights involving poisonous snakes. The amphitheater is the center of entertainment here in Pompeii, and it is always packed full of eager spectators. Nearby, we see two young lovers embracing. They are clearly infatuated with each other and cannot keep their hands off one another. Despite their tender years, they are already discussing marriage and a future together. Nearby, a group of older men discuss business deals. They are merchants from all over the Mediterranean, and they have come to Pompeii to do business. These men are shrewd and calculating, and they know how to get the best prices for their goods. You can tell by the way they haggle with the local vendors that they mean to get the best deal possible. We now find ourselves in the heart of the city, where a group of street vendors are preparing to open their stalls for the day. The sight that meets our eyes is truly a feast for the senses. Stalls overflow with fresh fruit and vegetables, including figs, grapes, pomegranates, and apples, as well as grain, cheese, and cured meats. There are also vendors selling freshly baked bread and pastries, as well as sweet treats like honey and dates. But it's not just food that's on sale here. We also see stalls selling pottery, glassware, and metal. There are also vendors selling clothes, jewelry, and other personal adornments. The energy is palpable here in the marketplace, as buyers and sellers alike vie for the best deals. Bartering is common, and the din of voices rises above the bleating of sheep and the clucking of chickens. If you are looking for something in particular, chances are you will find it here in the marketplace of Pompeii. And finally, I want to bring your attention to the imposing structure that looms over the city. It is Mount Vesuvius. Its slopes may appear tranquil and serene right now, but do not be fooled. For centuries, it has been a volcano, spewing fire and brimstone and burying entire cities beneath its ash. And now it rumbles ominously in the distance. A constant reminder that even in the height of summer, winter may be just around the corner. The year is 79 AD. Mount Vesuvius is just minding its own business, quietly smoldering away on the Italian peninsula. Meanwhile, in the town of Pompeii, a merchant has just gotten back from a long trip to Bithynia. He's got some nice presents for his wife and kids, and soon he will be sharing stories of his travels at dinner. But it's not all sunshine and roses in ancient Rome. This year, Emperor Nero is making everyone pay for his lavish lifestyle. Augustus has been dead for a while now, But the Julio-Claudian dynasty continues under Tiberius, who really isn't all that beloved by the people. In fact, he was never particularly well loved by anyone. So yeah, it's not all that uncommon for people to wish for a new emperor. But for now, Tiberius is still firmly in charge, and things are going to stay that way until 37 AD when Caligula takes over. So today we're talking about daily life in Pompeii during the reign of Tiberius. The average person might have been able to afford a house like this, an interior Roman villa with a courtyard, frescoed walls and columns supporting a flat roof. It wasn't anything special, but it would have been very comfortable. There are no chairs in this period, so benches were probably placed around the table in the center of the room where the whole family would eat together. Men and women would sit on one side of the table and children would sit on the other. Each person would have their own plate of food and wine and would serve themselves from their own plate. Those slaves would serve wine from a jug into their master's cups. This meal was probably prepared by a female slave. Women in this period were expected to be domestic and perform all the traditional women's work, like cooking, cleaning, and spinning flax. While they could own property, they couldn't manage their own household or enter into contracts. In the atrium, which is the center of the home, there was an opening called an This is where rainwater would flow down into a pool at the bottom. The water would then be used to water plants or for cleaning. The impluvium would also double as a sort of skylight. Since there were no windows in this period, the openings were covered with glass, which let light pass through. However, the glass didn't block sound. So if it was raining, you would definitely know it. In warmer months, the glass panels would be removed and curtains would be hung in their place. In colder months, a brazier would be set up in the atrium to help heat the house. The fresco on the wall shows a mythological scene with cupids and satyrs. Frescoes were incredibly popular in Pompeii, and they often contained scenes from Greek mythology. The paintings weren't just beautiful, they served as a way to teach the uneducated masses about the myths. For example, this fresco behind the dining table shows Romulus killing his twin brother Remus. After the two of them had founded the city of Rome, the story goes that Romulus and Remus were raised by a she-wolf, and when they grew up, they decided to build a new city. They disagreed on where the city should be built, so they decided to settle their differences by fighting. Unfortunately, this meant that only one of the twins could survive. Our merchant is just getting home from a long trip, so he's changed into more comfortable clothes. To change from his travel clothes, he would first remove his paludamentum, which was a large rectangular piece of fabric that wrapped around his shoulders. He would then take off his tunic and throw it on the floor for his slave to pick up. He would wash his hands and face before dinner and use a scraper to remove any dirt or dead skin. He would then put on a fresh tunic and a pair of shorts made out of linen. The clothing would have come all the way down from Greece, and our merchant probably paid someone to carry it to him from Athens. Tunicas were usually white, but the merchant here might have dyed his green to show off a bit. If he were traveling, he would wear a hooded cloak over his tunic and travel sandals on his feet. These sandals were practical because they were held on with a strap and would unfall off if he had to run or walk long distances. His travel clothes were probably pretty dirty by now, so he'd give them to his slave to clean. The merchant's son is doing his best to avoid spilling his glass of wine. It was common for children to help out around the house. Even young boys would take care of the younger children, tend to livestock or run errands. For older boys, this might mean assisting their father in his business. The father would provide the capital and the son would do the labor. Pompeian fathers were pretty strict, so it was important for the boy to listen to his dad and do what he was told. If he were an unruly child, he might be sold to a slave trader to learn some manners. Slavery was pretty brutal in this period, so it's fortunate that our little boy isn't heading into that life. Instead, he'll get to keep his freedom and maybe even make a good living for himself. There were 4 main classes in Roman society. At the top of the social hierarchy were the patricians, who were wealthy. Below them were the equestrian class, who were mostly merchants and traders. Underneath them were the freedmen, who were former slaves who had been emancipated. And finally, at the bottom, were the plebeians, who were the poor and the working class. You could move up or down these rungs depending on how much money you had. It was possible for a freedman to become a millionaire and move into the upper class. And many of the emperors were originally from the equestrian class, but this was rare. More often than not, freedmen would struggle to make enough money to support themselves and their families. Women in this period did not enjoy the same rights as men. They could own property and participate in religious cults, but they couldn't divorce their husband or initiate a lawsuit. Their role was to be domestic and serve her father and then later her husband. If a woman didn't get married, she would be considered incomplete, and it would reflect badly on her family. Not all women had the luxury of being able to choose who they wanted to marry. Some were forced into marriage with a man that their parents had chosen for them. Most marriages were between people of equal social status, and it was expected that both parties would be physically attracted to each other. The bride wore a veil to cover her face until she was presented to her groom. After the ceremony, she would change into a wedding dress, which was decorated with embroidery and jewels. This liberated woman was probably higher up in society since she owned a slave. Slaves could be bought and sold and were considered property. It was common for wealthy Romans to buy slaves to work in their homes. They were responsible for cooking, cleaning, gardening, raising the children, and basically anything else that needed to be done. Some slaves worked outside the home as laborers or in positions of service, like being a barber or a hairdresser. You could also be enslaved for being a criminal or being captured in war, and unlike the other classes, slaves could be of either gender. Here, a woman lounges on a couch while a male slave pours her a glass of wine. She looks quite comfortable, but she's probably drunk. Drinking wine was popular in this period, and it was usually mixed with water. Wine was imported from Greece and was much more expensive than local Italian wine. Slaves and freedmen could rarely afford luxuries like wine, but they might have been able to drink which was a cheap, rough wine made from sour grapes. Alcoholism was common, and it was not uncommon for a drunken person to stumble around the streets. Sometimes they would end up passed out in the middle of the road where they would be stepped on by. This man is getting ready for bed. When he's done using the bathroom, he'll go back to his room and lay down on his mattress. The mattresses in this period were stuffed with straw and were extremely He would have to flip the mattress occasionally to keep the bugs and mice away. If he were a wealthy man, he might be able to afford a bronze or marble bed frame instead of the wooden one shown here. He would also have better quality linens, and perhaps even a mosquito net hanging over the bed. Even the emperor's wife, Livia, complained about how uncomfortable the mattresses were. So you can imagine that this guy was probably pretty miserable at night. Day in the life of a baker. Wake up before sunrise and immediately start preparing for the day. Get the ovens fired up and start kneading dough. Work all morning, making bread, pastries, and other baked goods. Take breaks to eat and drink. Hope that there aren't any customers who want to buy anything during the break. Finish up the baking and start cleaning the ovens. Close the shop early in the afternoon and head home. Eat dinner with the family and relax for the rest of the evening. Go to sleep. Day in the life of a mother. Wake up early and start preparing breakfast for the family. Spend the morning cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the children. Eat lunch with the family and then go shopping. Buy food and other supplies for the household. Spend the afternoon socializing with friends and neighbors. Eat dinner with the family and then spend the evening spinning flax or weaving. Go to sleep. Day in the life of a school child. Wake up early and get ready for the day. Walk to school with friends and study all morning. Learn how to read, write, and do basic math. Take breaks to play games and socialize. Finish up studying and walk home. Eat lunch with the family and then go play. Play all afternoon with friends. Come home when it starts to get dark. Eat dinner with the family and then go to sleep. Thank you guys so much for watching. Are you ready to take a trip back in time to one of the most fascinating periods in history? Today we're going to explore the scandalous world of Roman pleasure, from the infamous brothels of Pompeii to the shocking graffiti that adorned their walls. If you've ever wondered what it was like to be a Roman emperor or gladiator, then this is the video for you. You'll learn how powerful men like Caligula and Nero indulged in their darkest desires, as well as the surprising ways that women played a role in the Roman sex industry. You'll also discover how the Romans viewed love, marriage, and sexuality, and how they differed from our own views today. But before we dive into this steamy topic, let's take a moment to appreciate the genius of ChatGPT, which has helped us craft this engaging narrative. This AI assistant has allowed us to produce high-quality content that is both informative and entertaining. So be sure to stay until the end to learn more about how you can use ChatGPT to enhance your own work. The legacy of ancient Rome still echoes through the centuries, shaping our language, law, and even our love lives. But beneath the grandeur of the Colosseum and the Pantheon lurks a more intimate side of Roman culture. To truly understand the Romans, we must venture into the shadows and uncover their most intimate secrets. In the heart of Pompeii, a city frozen in time by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the ruins of brothels whisper tales of an ancient sex trade. These establishments were not the dimly lit dens of vice found in later centuries, but rather respectable businesses catering to the elite of Roman society. In fact, the frescoes adorning their walls depict scenes from Greek mythology, showcasing the patronage system that flourished in Pompeii. The city's brothels were licensed and regulated, with prostitutes paying taxes to the state for the privilege of working as independent contractors. Although frowned upon by philosophers and poets, prostitution was widespread and accepted in Rome. Prostitutes could earn a decent living and climb the social ladder by catering to wealthy clients, some even becoming celebrities in their own right. The most famous brothel in Pompeii housed up to 40 women and luxurious rooms with frescoes depicting everything from romantic trysts to athletic competitions. While there is no direct evidence of sexual activity in Pompeii's brothels, the presence of mirrors, perfume, and cosmetics suggests a more intimate purpose. The walls are adorned with erotic murals that would make any modern viewer blush, offering a glimpse into the raunchy humor and sexual liberation of Roman culture. One particularly shocking fresco depicts a woman straddling a man, while another shows two men engaged in a three-way encounter. Despite their reputation for debauchery, Pompeii's brothels were places of business, and the women who worked there were respected members of the community. Many brothel owners were wealthy and powerful men who saw the sex trade as a legitimate investment. Some brothels even employed male prostitutes to cater to the desires of wealthy male clients. However, there were also those who looked down upon the sex industry, such as the Stoics, who believed that sex should only be used for procreation. Nevertheless, the Romans had a more relaxed attitude towards sexuality. Than many other cultures, and prostitution was widely accepted as a part of everyday life. Beyond the walls of Pompeii's brothels, the city was also home to a thriving graffiti culture. The streets were covered with cheeky inscriptions, some of which were surprisingly. Graffiti was a way for the Romans to express themselves and communicate with others in a public space. And while many of the inscriptions were political in nature, others were more personal. Some of the graffiti in Pompeii is shockingly erotic, with images of genitalia and sexually explicit phrases scrawled across the walls. This suggests that the Romans were not afraid to embrace their sexuality, and were comfortable with displaying it in public spaces. It also shows that they had a sense of humor when it came to matters of sex, and were not afraid to make light of it. One particular piece of graffiti in Pompeii has become infamous: a single Latin sentence spray-painted on a wall. It reads, "Beware of the dog that bites." But if you look closely, you'll notice something else. The words are hiding something naughty, the outline of a set of female breasts. This cheeky inscription is just one example of the kind of humor that the Romans enjoyed. They liked to find amusement in everyday life, even if it meant pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable. Among the most thought-provoking pieces of graffiti in Pompeii is a drawing of a winged female figure with the words "Beware of the dog that bites" inscribed around her. While the meaning behind this particular piece is open to interpretation, it offers a glimpse into the Roman fascination with mythology and their love of wordplay. Another interesting piece of graffiti in Pompeii is a crude drawing of a donkey with large testicles, accompanied by the words "Beware of the dog." This bizarre image may have been a commentary on male vanity or a humorous take on the dangers of letting your guard down. These examples of graffiti show that the Romans were not as different from us as we might think. They had a sense of humor, enjoyed sexual innuendos, and were not afraid to express themselves in public. By studying their art, we gain a deeper understanding of their culture and the complexities of Roman society. Throughout history, influential figures have often been portrayed as paragons of virtue and morality, but behind closed doors, they may have indulged in activities that would shock the public. Roman emperors are a prime example of this duality. Often seen as powerful and majestic, these rulers were also known for their lavish parties and orgies. Caligula, the infamous emperor responsible for building the first brothel in Rome, was notorious for his wild parties. He hosted events inviting 8 men of all ages, social classes, and sexual orientations, ensuring a diverse and exciting guest list. The younger men were typically poorer and attracted to older, wealthier men who could provide them with financial support. These gatherings were not just about sex, but also about forging connections and climbing the social ladder. Caligula's infamous brothel became a hub of debauchery and excess, with the emperor himself presiding over orgies that featured gladiators. The sexual encounters documented by Roman historians are shocking by today's standards, including accounts of Caligula's wife, Melonia, engaging in sexual acts with other women in his presence. Another emperor known for his hedonistic lifestyle was Nero. After the Great Fire of Rome, Nero rebuilt the city and filled it with luxury brothels and baths. He commissioned the construction of vast pleasure boats, complete with brothels and taverns, hosting extravagant parties that lasted for days. Nero's insatiable appetite for pleasure was matched only by his cruelty, as he chained women to chariots like horses and whipped them as they pulled him around. He also hosted feasts inviting 8 men of different types, including bald, short, or fat men, to cater to his diverse sexual preferences. Nero's debauchery knew no bounds, and he was rumored to have prostituted himself in taverns and brothels where men of all kinds gathered. His infamous orgies featured chariot races, fist fights, and gladiator battles, as well as traditional sexual encounters. These Roman emperors may have been considered heroes by their subjects, but their private lives were far from virtuous. Their love of sex and revelry may have seemed excessive and shocking, but they were also products of their time, living in a society that embraced pleasure in excess. Love and lust were central to Roman culture, influencing everything from poetry and art to politics and religion. The Romans believed that love was a powerful force that could bring people together and inspire great works of art. They celebrated passionate love in their literature, with poets like Catullus composing passionate love poems that are still read and admired today. However, Roman views on love and sex were more complex than they may seem at first glance. Arranged marriages were common, especially among the upper classes, and women were often expected to marry for political or economic reasons. While love matches were also popular, the Romans believed that love and marriage were 2 different things entirely. In fact, Roman law did not recognize cohabitation before marriage, and extramarital affairs were relatively uncommon. Despite this, the Romans were fascinated by love and sex. and they explored these themes in their art and architecture as well. The famous Roman aphrodisiacs, objects designed to enhance sexual desire, reflect the Romans' preoccupation with love and lust. These objects, which included jewelry, perfumes, and potions, were often given as gifts to lovers or used in rituals intended to increase sexual potency. The Romans also had a surprisingly liberal attitude towards homosexuality, which was widely accepted in both urban and rural areas. Male prostitutes were common, and same-sex relationships were even celebrated in some circles. However, the Romans' views on love and sex were not always so progressive. The cult of Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, also reflected the Romans' obsession with youth and physical perfection. As the cult spread throughout the empire, it became increasingly so, with priests and priestesses engaging in lewd behavior and worshippers sacrificing animals in grotesque rituals. This cult, along with others, demonstrates that the Romans' fascination with love and sex was not always innocent. As we delve deeper into the world of ancient Rome, it's important to remember that the Romans were not as different from us as we might think. They experienced the same joys and pleasures, as well as the same struggles and heartaches. When it came to love and sex, their stories and experiences, though separated by time, continue to resonate with us today, reminding us that we are all human, regardless of when or where we live. So as you continue to explore the world of ancient Rome, keep in mind that the Romans were not perfect, but they were real, just like us. Their love lives, though scandalous by today's standards, were a reflection of their culture, values, and beliefs. And by understanding their stories, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of human nature and the universality of our experiences. When Vesuvius erupted, it was the end of the world for the citizens of Pompeii, a single event that destroyed an entire civilization. But even in the face of such tragedy, one thing catches our attention: the presence of religion. It's evident everywhere. There are shrines in every house and temple complexes outside them. The people of Pompeii were deeply religious, and their rituals and beliefs offer us a window into how people lived during the time. We will explore some of these beliefs today, starting with the gods they worshipped. They shared a lot of similarities with Greek mythology, but also had some unique figures of their own. Mars was the god of war, Minerva was the goddess of wisdom and strategy, and Jupiter was the king of the gods. Mercury was known as the messenger of the gods, and Juno was the queen of the Olympians. Also, Vesta was a major goddess because she represented the hearth. And so, any priestess who served her was considered sacred because she symbolized the home and family. The Romans also worshipped household gods, called Lares and Penates. The word lar was used to refer to a male spirit that protected a particular place, while Penates referred to the gods of food stores. Some might say that this is similar to how Christians pray to God and Jesus in the comfort of their homes today. In the same way, the Romans prayed to their household gods for protection and good fortune. The Greeks called these gods Genius and Juno, and there was even a tradition of celebrating their birthdays with special ceremonies. This blend of Roman and Egyptian faith created a rich tapestry of religious life in Pompeii. For example, there was a large temple complex dedicated to Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. This temple was so important that it even had its own amphitheater where theatrical performances could be held. Another temple was dedicated to Apollo, the god of music and poetry, and there may have even been a temple to Minerva. This is all thanks to an inscription that was found near a fountain. But let's not forget about those who didn't make it to the temples. These shrines were often decorated with flowers and incense, and would have been used by the family to pray for good health, wealth, and success in their crops. Most homes would have also had a small altar where sacrifices could be made. These practices show that religion was not just something that people did at temples, but was an integral part of everyday life. The Romans believed that the gods were always trying to communicate with them, and they needed to be ready to receive those messages. This meant that the Romans were constantly on the lookout for signs and omens. And if someone spilled salt, they better hurry up and throw some dust over their left shoulder to avoid the evil eye. The Romans took these omens very seriously, and they had a whole system of divination, or fortune-telling. They would consult oracles, read the entrails of sacrificed animals, and even ask questions of the dead. They also had a special branch of augury, or the practice of interpreting signs from birds, that dealt with lightning. This was called etia, or causes, and it was believed that the gods could send lightning bolts as a sign of their displeasure. But the Romans weren't the only ones looking to the skies for answers. The Maya also had a sophisticated system of astronomy, and they used their knowledge to predict eclipses, the solstices. They kept track of time by observing the movements of the planets and stars, and they even had their own calendar. However, unlike the Romans, the Maya didn't believe that lightning was a sign of divine anger. Instead, they saw it as a reminder of the power of nature and the importance of respecting the natural world. Both cultures, though separated by thousands of miles and centuries, had a deep respect for the forces of nature. Whether it was through divination or sacrifice, both cultures sought to understand and interact with the world around them. Speaking of sacrifices, that was another big part of Roman religion. As we mentioned earlier, animals were the most common sacrifices, but they weren't the only ones. These sacrifices weren't necessarily a way to appease the gods, but a way to show them that their worshippers were giving them the best that they had. It was a way to demonstrate loyalty and commitment. Now let's talk about the volcano. Mount Vesuvius is one of the most famous volcanoes in history, and for good reason. When it erupted in 79 AD, it buried the Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under a thick layer of ash and pumice. What makes Vesuvius so remarkable is not just the fact that it erupted, but how it impacted the surrounding area. The eruption caused widespread destruction, killing thousands and leaving behind a landscape that was forever changed. In the centuries since the eruption, Vesuvius has become a symbol of the destructive power of nature. People have wondered why the Romans didn't try to escape when they saw the signs of the impending eruption, and what those signs were in the first place. Did they see the earthquakes that had happened in the months before the eruption? Did they hear the rumble of the mountain as it prepared to blow? Or did they ignore the warnings altogether? Perhaps the gods themselves sent a sign that the Romans should have heeded. After all, they were a religious people, and they believed that the gods were always trying to communicate with them. Maybe they just didn't listen. Maybe they thought that they were invincible. Unfortunately, we may never know for sure. But one thing is certain. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius was one of the most devastating events in human history. It was a disaster that not only killed thousands of people, but also wiped out an entire city. It was a tragedy that left a lasting impact on the ancient world. It was a city of merchants and traders, a place where goods from all over the empire could be bought and sold. It was also a city of culture and entertainment. It had its own theater where plays and musical performances were held. It had its own amphitheater where gladiators fought to the death. But perhaps most importantly, Pompeii was a city of faith. In addition to the temples and shrines, there were also numerous public spaces dedicated to the gods. One of the most notable was the Forum, which was the center of public life in the city. The Forum was also home to several temples, including one dedicated to the Emperor Augustus. Despite the presence of these temples, the people of Pompeii were not immune to the effects of the eruption. In fact, it is believed that the eruption occurred during a festival dedicated to the goddess Isis, suggesting that not even the gods could protect them from the wrath of Vesuvius. The eruption of Vesuvius caught the people of Pompeii by surprise. It was a sudden and violent event that caught them off guard. It was a scene of utter chaos and destruction. It is a reminder of the awesome power of nature and the fragility of human life. Who knows? Maybe the people of Pompeii were simply unlucky enough to find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or maybe they were just too busy living their lives to pay attention to the signs that the gods were sending them. Whatever the case may be, the eruption of Vesuvius is a reminder that no one is safe from the fury of Mother Nature. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD was a catastrophic event that forever changed the course of history. It was a tragedy that claimed the lives of thousands and left an indelible mark on the ancient world. The people of Pompeii were able to rebuild their lives despite the devastation that they faced. They were able to pick up the pieces and start again. But they are also a source of inspiration. They remind us that no matter how difficult things may seem, we can always find a way to move forward. No matter how dark things may seem, we can always find a ray of light to guide us through the darkness. We hope that you enjoyed this journey through the religious beliefs of the people of Pompeii. We also hope that you learned something new and that you were inspired by the stories of the people of Pompeii. They were a resilient and resourceful people who were able to endure the unimaginable. Their story is a reminder that no matter what challenges we may face in life, we can always find a way to move forward. Imagine you are strolling through a busy street. On either side of you, buildings crowd close together. There are walls adorned with bright frescoes, and the sounds of daily life echo off their surfaces. Vendors call out to customers and they try to get your attention. You see an artisan bending over his work table, carefully applying the finishing touches to a piece of pottery. Nearby, the rhythmic clang of a hammer against metal fills the air as a blacksmith forges a new tool. And in the corner, a mosaic artist painstakingly arranges small pieces of colored stone into a beautiful design. In front of a shop, a group of women are bargaining over the price of some goods. Some of them wear fine garments and jewelry, while others are more plainly dressed. One woman holds up a small clay pot, inspecting it closely, while another runs her fingers along a length of fabric. You have just stepped back in time 2,000 years to the bustling city of Pompeii. But what exactly were they selling? What kinds of things did the people of Pompeii buy and sell? This is a question that has intrigued historians and archaeologists for centuries. Today, we are going to find out. Join us as we explore the world of commerce and craftsmanship and discover the everyday items that were traded in one of the ancient world's most famous cities. What do you think was the most important thing to the people of Pompeii? Would you say food or money? Well, actually, both. In fact, these two things are intrinsically linked and make a great starting point for this topic. As we know, life in Pompeii was not easy. While it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Roman Empire, it was also prone to natural disasters such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Therefore, the people of Pompeii had to be prepared for anything. This meant that they needed to store food and other supplies, so that they would have something to fall back on when times were tough. The main exports of Pompeii wine, olive oil and fish sauce, called garum, which was made by fermenting fish and salt for several months. These products were shipped all over the Mediterranean, bringing wealth and prosperity to the city. The city was also home to a number of skilled craftsmen who produced high-quality goods that were in demand throughout the Roman Empire. Potters created beautiful vases and other ceramic objects, while blacksmiths made tools and weapons of the finest quality. Mosaic artists, meanwhile, were renowned for their skill in creating intricate and colorful designs from small pieces of glass and stone. But it wasn't just men who were involved in trade and craftsmanship. Women played an important role too. Many women in Pompeii worked as merchants, buying and selling goods in the marketplace. Others ran taverns and inns, providing food and lodging for travelers. In fact, it was not uncommon for women to own and operate businesses in Pompeii. This was because the city had a relatively high literacy rate, and many women were able to read and write. This allowed them to keep detailed records of their transactions and manage their businesses more efficiently. Additionally, women in Pompeii had more legal rights than their counterparts in other parts of the Roman Empire. They could own property, make contracts, and even take out loans. This gave them the financial freedom to start and run their own businesses. Now that we know about the people of Pompeii, let's talk about where they did their shopping. Pompeii was a vibrant and bustling city full of life and activity. Its streets were lined with shops, restaurants, and other businesses that catered to the needs of its citizens. One of the most common types of shops in Pompeii was the a taberna was a small family-run business that sold a variety of goods. They were typically owned and operated by a husband and wife team. The husband would often work as a craftsman, producing goods such as pottery, tools, or furniture. The wife would then take care of the shop and help to sell the goods. Tavernas were found all over Pompeii, selling everything from fresh produce to handmade goods to imported luxury items. Some tavernas even specialized in certain types of goods, such as a bakery that sold only bread and pastries, or a pottery shop that sold only cups and bowls. Stepping inside a Pompeian shop would have been quite an experience. The interior of the shop would have been filled with the sights, sounds, and smells of commerce. Customers would have seen shelves stacked with goods, tables piled high with merchandise, and artisans working at their craft. They would have heard the chatter of customers and salespeople, the clinking of coins, and the hammering of a blacksmith, and they would have smelled the aromas of freshly baked bread, the metallic scent of a blacksmith's forge, and the pungent odors of imported spices. It was not unusual for different types of shops to be located close to each other. This created a kind of shopping district where customers could find a variety of goods in one area. For example, a customer might visit a taberna to purchase fresh produce, then stop by a pottery shop to pick up a new bowl. We mentioned earlier that many Pompeians were merchants, but how did they advertise their wares? Well, the answer is pretty simple. You guessed it, signs. Signs were an important part of commerce in Pompeii. They were used to identify businesses, attract customers, and convey information. In fact, Pompeii was one of the first cities in the Roman Empire to use signs as a form of advertising. This was made possible by the invention of the Latin alphabet, which allowed for the mass production of signs. Pompeii merchants quickly realized the power of signs and began using them to promote their businesses. Most signs in Pompeii were made of wood or metal and were placed above the entrance to a shop or business. They often featured the name of the business or the products that were sold there. Some signs were more elaborate and included images or symbols that represented the business. For example, a sign for a tavern might feature a picture of a goblet or a plate of food. Other signs were designed to attract the attention of passers-by and entice them to enter a shop. They often used bright colors, bold fonts, and humorous images to get people's attention. But it wasn't just signs that were used to advertise businesses in Pompeii. Merchants also used word of mouth and relationships to get the word out about their products. They would often give discounts or free samples to attract new customers and build loyalty among regulars. They also relied on customer reviews and recommendations to help promote their businesses. So if a product was good, word would quickly spread throughout the city and bring in even more customers. Exploring the shops and businesses of Pompeii gives us a fascinating glimpse into the daily life of the ancient Romans. From the hustle and bustle of the marketplace to the quiet corner shop, the commercial activity in Pompeii was a vital part of the city's economy and culture. As you can imagine, life in Pompeii was not all work and no play. The people of Pompeii enjoyed a wide range of leisure activities, including attending gladiatorial combats, chariot races, and theatrical performances. They also liked to gamble, fight with deadly animals, and throw parties. However, it should be noted that not everyone in Pompeii was wealthy enough to participate in these activities on a regular basis. In fact, a significant portion of the population were slaves who had no access to leisure activities. The excavations at Pompeii have revealed a wealth of information about the daily lives of the people who lived there. Archaeologists have found everything from frescoes to mosaics to jewelry that provides insights into the culture, customs, and values of the ancient Romans. For example, the discovery of a gladiator's house revealed that these warriors were not necessarily slaves, as was commonly believed. Instead, many gladiators were free men who chose to participate in this dangerous form of entertainment. Thank you for joining us today as we explored the world of commerce and craftsmanship in ancient Pompeii. We hope you enjoyed learning about the everyday items that were bought and sold in one of the ancient world's most famous cities. From wine and olive oil to pottery and tools, the people of Pompeii produced and traded a wide range of goods that were essential to their daily lives. We also hope you learned about the role that women played in the economy of Pompeii, and how they were able to own and operate their own businesses in a society that was often restrictive towards women. Additionally, we hope you gained insight into how merchants advertised their wares and attracted customers in a pre-digital age. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, let us know in the comments below what other aspects of ancient Pompeii you would like us to cover in future videos. When the mountain that towers over the Italian city of Pompeii rumbled to life on the morning of August at D 79, it did so with an earth-shattering roar that could be heard for miles. But this was only the beginning. For the people of Pompeii, the coming hours would bring even greater horrors, as thousands of lives were cut short and the entire city was buried under a sea of ash. So what happened in the final hours of Pompeii? Keep watching to find out. At the time, the prosperous Roman city of Pompeii was home to around 11,000 people who had grown accustomed to the rumbling of Mount Vesuvius, the volcano that loomed over their city. In fact, many of them probably considered themselves quite lucky to live in the shadow of such a powerful natural wonder. But little did they know just how dangerous a force their seemingly benevolent Vesuvius truly was. In the days leading up to the disaster, there had been strange signs that something was not right. Pliny the Younger, a Roman writer and statesman who witnessed the eruption from a distance, wrote about these ominous events. In his letter to the historian Tacitus, he explained that the nights before the eruption were unusually bright, and that fumes were rising from the ground and flowing through the nearby city of Stavia. However, despite these unsettling occurrences, life in Pompeii continued as normal. On that fateful morning, the people of Pompeii awoke to a strong earthquake that shook the city and surrounding areas. It is believed that this quake may have registered between 5 and 6 on the Richter scale, which would have been enough to cause some damage and undoubtedly left many people frightened. But once again, life went on as normal and the tremors were likely forgotten about by midday. It wasn't long after this that the real disaster began. At approximately 1 p.m., the earthquake that had shaken Pompeii earlier that day struck again, but this time it was far more violent. Buildings trembled violently, and people ran in terror through the streets. This was not just any earthquake. It was a prelude to the catastrophic events that were about to unfold, with the ground shaking beneath their feet. The citizens of Pompeii may have begun to suspect that there was a real possibility of Vesuvius eruption, but it wasn't until they looked up at the smoke billowing from the summit of the mountain that they knew they were in grave danger. As onlookers watched in horror, they saw that the ash cloud emanating from Vesuvius was growing larger by the minute and spreading across the entire Bay of Naples. The stench of sulfur hung heavy in the air, and small pebbles rained down onto the city. By this point, it would have become clear to everyone that there was nothing they could do to prevent the impending doom. The eruption of Vesuvius was unavoidable. By 2 p.m., ash was falling over Pompeii and other nearby cities at a rate of 4 inches per hour. If the people of Pompeii had access to modern-day technology, they might have seen the writing on the wall and fled the city. But in reality, few people even considered the idea of leaving. For centuries, the people of Pompeii had lived in the shadow of Vesuvius, and the mountain had never shown any signs of actually erupting during human memory. To them, it was simply a part of the landscape. And while some people did try to escape, others were simply paralyzed by fear and unable to move. As the ash continued to fall, people desperately tried to protect themselves. Some hid in their homes, while others sought refuge in the public buildings, perhaps hoping that they would be safer inside than out in the open. Others still fled to the hills on foot, away from the advancing ash cloud. Some people made a beeline for the coast, where they hoped they might be able to escape the city by boat. However, the suffocating ash cloud soon reached the coast and the water, blocking out the sun and causing temperatures to plummet. Those who stayed behind in Pompeii were probably overcome by a sense of hopelessness. As the sun disappeared from view and darkness fell, the people of Pompeii huddled together in the streets, unsure of what to do next. It was at this point that many people began to panic, realizing the gravity of their situation for the first time. But it wasn't just the physical danger that they faced that caused them to feel this way. There was also the very real threat of looting and lawlessness. In times of crisis, people often reveal their true colors, and some people used the chaos to plunder the abandoned homes of their fellow citizens. Others turned to religion in their hour of need, calling on the gods for help. Still, others prayed that they would be saved by the Roman army, which was stationed nearby. But as the night wore on, it became clear that no one was coming to save them. And so the people of Pompeii spent the night in a state of terror, knowing that their fate was sealed. By now, the ash cloud had spread to a height of about 21 miles, blotting out the stars and making the sky appear like a vast expanse of black velvet. Amidst this unfolding disaster, the air grew thick with the choking ash, making breathing difficult and forcing people to stay indoors if they were still conscious. With the sky filled with smoke and the ground trembling beneath their feet, the people of Pompeii waited anxiously for the next chapter of this unfolding drama. Little did they know that the worst was yet to come. As the night wore on, the sounds of the collapsing city echoed through the darkness. People could hear the screams of those who had been trapped by falling debris, as well as the mournful cries of those who had lost loved ones in the disaster. These heart-wrenching sounds were soon replaced by an eerie silence as the ash cloud engulfed Pompeii and cut off sound. In the distance, people could hear the roar of the volcano. As it continued to spew ash and pumice into the air, they knew that they were being watched by this angry mountain, waiting for them to make their next move. To escape the suffocating ash, many people began digging holes in the ash to create air pockets. However, this proved to be a futile effort, as the ash continued to pile up and trap them underground. As the hours passed, the people of Pompeii began to succumb to the toxic gases that were seeping into their shelters. Some died peacefully in their sleep, while others suffered horrible fates. The strong winds that swept through the city carried with them small pebbles that hit people as bodies like tiny projectiles. Still others choked to death on the ash that filled their mouths and noses, or they were crushed by the weight of the ash that caved in their shelters. But even death did not bring relief. The ash continued to fall, burying the dead and covering their wounds. At around 6 a.m., a pyroclastic surge rolled down the slopes of Vesuvius, reaching Pompeii at around 8 a.m. Pyroclastic surges are fast-moving currents of hot gas and volcanic matter that race down the side of a volcano during an eruption. They can travel at speeds of up to 430 miles per hour and reach temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. As it tore through the city, the pyroclastic surge swept away everything in its path, incinerating people, animals, and buildings alike. Those who had taken shelter in the hills or on the outskirts of the city were probably incinerated alive. And so, the people of Pompeii perished in one of the most horrific ways imaginable, trapped and helpless as the volcano destroyed everything around them. With the main eruption finally over, the pyroclastic surge was the last straw that overwhelmed the doomed city. And by 9 a.m., the pyroclastic flow had passed through Pompeii, killing everyone in its path and scorching the landscape. The entire city was covered in a thick layer of ash and pumice, and the air was thick with smoke and toxic gases. Pompeii had once been a bustling city of around 11,000 people, but now it was a scene of unimaginable devastation and death. What had been a thriving community was now a mass grave, and the only sound that could be heard was the wind whistling through the empty streets. All that remained of the people of Pompeii were their skeletons, which were eventually discovered by archaeologists. In the centuries that followed, the story of Pompeii became a cautionary tale of the destructive power of nature. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius and the destruction of Pompeii had a profound impact on the people of the Roman Empire, and it served as a reminder of the fragility of human life in the face of natural disaster. And there we have it, a dramatic conclusion to the timeline of events in Pompeii's final hours. In this series, we explore ancient ruins, lost cities, and forgotten worlds to learn what they can teach us about history and ourselves. For our first episode, we head to the shadow of Vesuvius, to the buried and remembered city of Pompeii. It's easy to get lost in Pompeii. Even before you arrive, it seems like everywhere you look, there are reminders of its eternal slumber. The most famous images of the site showed deserted streets choked with debris, buildings crumbling into overgrown plazas, statues defaced by pumice and frescoes peeling from their walls. It's a city locked in time, a snapshot of an ancient world forever still. It's also, however, just a small part of a story. There's more here than empty shells. There are stories in the spaces between the ruins, too, and if you know where to look, those stories can come flooding back to life. Pompeii was founded around the 7th century BC on the Bay of Naples, where Italy's mainland meets the sea. For the next 1,500 years, it grew and changed with the ups and downs of Roman fortunes. But when the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius struck in 79 AD, Pompeii was home to perhaps 11,000 people. Their stories were abruptly ended when torrents of ash, pumice, and hot gas rained down on their city and buried it under 4 to 6 meters of debris. Most of its citizens perished, turning the city into a mass grave. Pompeii became a footnote in history, lost beneath the earth until rediscovery 1,200 years later would reveal its secrets to the modern world. The exact location of Pompeii was known locally for centuries after the eruption, but its true identity was long forgotten. When Renaissance writers finally uncovered its name and past during excavations in the 1700s, they found something unexpected. Instead of the humble town recorded by Pliny the Younger, they discovered the haunting ruins of a great Roman metropolis. But the discovery wasn't exactly a lucky accident. In the mid-18th century, a newly rich Italian nobleman named Girolamo Roberti commissioned a canal to be dug near his land in the small town of Torre de Naples. Excavations began in 1748, and by the following year, workers had unearthed marble, frescoed walls, and other treasures hinting at the presence of a Roman city. Rumors spread quickly through Europe's intellectual elite. King Charles VII of Sweden sent his court physician, the Baron von Soderstrom, to investigate. He identified the site as Pompeii and began systematic excavations. By 1753, word of the find reached the reigning pope, who appointed a commission to oversee excavations in the interest of preserving this unprecedented discovery for the Catholic Church and the wider public. The excavations continued under the direction of the Spanish Dominican monk, the chaplain Vincenzo, and the first public tours of the ruins commenced. With such a prestigious patron, Pompeii's popularity skyrocketed. Artists flocked to the site, producing paintings, sculptures, and etchings of the ruined city, many showing the victims of the eruption preserved in their final moments. By the end of the 18th century, over 100,000 visitors had come to see Pompeii for themselves. For all the excitement surrounding these new discoveries, however, the 18th century saw much of Pompeii lost once again. Overzealous excavation practices caused severe damage to the site, stealing away frescoes and entire buildings. Visitors used the ruins as a quarry to build their own homes, or carried off fragments of mosaics and marble for souvenirs. Perhaps even worse, others simply walked across the ruins, trampling over priceless artifacts. Despite the steady stream of visitors paying admission fees to view the site, the money went not to its upkeep but rather the pockets of corrupt officials. It took another 2 centuries for efforts to conserve the site to catch up with excavations and restoration work. During the 19th and 20th centuries, archaeologists returned to Pompeii to painstakingly uncover and preserve its layers of the past. Today, only a small portion of the ancient city has been excavated. Careful restoration work reveals just enough of the city to capture the scope of its former glory, without disturbing the delicate layers of sediment underneath. Pompeii is an extraordinary place, but it's worth remembering that it was a normal Roman city. Like any city, it was full of all types of people, young and old, rich and poor, men, women, and children, each with their own hopes, dreams, and daily routines. Life here was disrupted in an instant, but the few moments it bought its residents and visitors to prepare for their untimely deaths are laid bare throughout the city. These stories aren't told in stone, but in detail, some as small as a fingernail. It was love at first sight for many early excavators. When the site was first opened to the public, it was mostly just a vast expanse of gray rubble. Over time, however, careful digging revealed the outlines of individuals trapped beneath the ash, frozen in their final moments. Plaster casts have become iconic representations of the victims of Pompeii. Created by pouring plaster into the void left by a body after it decomposed, the casts offer a hauntingly intimate glimpse into the lives cut short in the disaster. But no 2 casts are the same, revealing the unique stories of each individual preserved in their final posture, whether standing, stretching out a hand, or huddled in a fetal position. Each tells a different tale. Some lie face down, perhaps killed while fleeing the disaster. Others are in mid-strides, their day interrupted by sudden catastrophe. One woman, preserved forever in her final moments, wears a leather sandal on one foot and a gold ring on her right index finger, perhaps a wedding band. Her pose suggests she felt the tremors of the approaching pyroclastic flow and dropped to her knees in terror as the suffocating wave crashed over her. Some victims were too large to be fully cast, but even partial remains evoke palpable emotions. The bodies of these victims were never recovered. They remain buried beneath the ruins. In their place, archaeologists carefully brush away the dirt to reveal the imprint left by the human form. Sometimes only a single shoe or sandal remains visible. Other times, only the shape of a person remains. In the forum, a life-size cast stands next to a shallow pool, seemingly waiting for someone to draw water from it. Just beyond, a bronze cauldron still sits nestled against the wall of a building, as if its owner will return to tend the fire soon. It's a testament to the speed of the disaster that everyday objects like these remain abandoned, suspended in the midst of their daily use. Across the city, amidst the plaster casts, are dozens of pieces of jewelry made of bronze, copper, and iron. Many were lost on their owners as they fled the advancing pyroclastic flows, and many tell stories of the people who once wore them. A bronze fibula, or brooch, was likely part of a fine Roman garment. Its delicately chased design shows a hare chasing a dog. Nearby, a copper ring set with a carnelian gemstone could once have adorned a toga clasp or been worn as a seal for wax tablet. Another ring with a bezel set with rock crystal may have been part of a bride's dowry, placed on her finger on her wedding day, only to be snatched away moments later. Here, the items of everyday life, like the fine clothes and jewelry, are transformed into clues. Each piece adds another layer to the story of the city and its inhabitants. These personal objects are complemented by a wealth of other artifacts, including hundreds of bronze and copper coins that likely paid for market goods. Pottery stamped with the seal of the Baker's Guild shows the importance of baking in Roman life. Hundreds of oil lamps once illuminated dinner tables, workshops, and the streets of the city, adding a warm glow to the darkness and banishing the shadows cast by Vesuvius. Throughout the ruins, the stories of Pompeii's inhabitants come to life in the most unlikely of places. Near the amphitheater, a bronze statuette of Dionysus, the god of wine, lies discarded, perhaps dropped by a spectator during the performance. A little further on, a wooden panel bearing a fresco of Venus awaits restoration in the on-site museum. The scene of a Greek myth, in which the goddess of love is born from the sea foam, is rendered in delicate colors with lyrical grace. Just outside the city walls, a lead mask depicting Mercury, the messenger of the gods, peers out from beneath a collapsed floor. In the Villa dei Misteri, a beautifully frescoed villa on the outskirts of the city, a counterframed painting shows a triumphant procession led by Priapus, the fertility god, his phallus flamboyantly displayed on his rear, a reminder of his power over nature's abundance. It's impossible to imagine the lives of those who lived here, but their stories resonate with us today because they're not so different from our own. Their homes and belongings, destroyed in an instant by forces of nature. As we walk through Pompeii, we witness the final moments of the Pompeians frozen in time beneath the ash. We see a runner with a scroll tucked under his arm, eternally making his delivery. An old man dozing in a chair beside an open window, awakened by the rumblings of the coming catastrophe. A lover embracing his partner, oblivious to the fate that awaits them both. We see fear in the contorted faces of those who knew what was happening, and terror in those whose expressions of surprise were solidified forever. As we make our way through the ruins, it's hard not to feel like we're walking through a graveyard. Everywhere we look, we see the silent ghosts of ordinary people whose lives were stolen from them. Of course, this wasn't a tomb. The people of Pompeii died suddenly and unexpectedly, caught off guard by the fury of Vesuvius. Yet in the end, it was almost perfectly preserved, their city entombed beneath meters of debris, halting the ceaseless passage of time and protecting the city and its people from looters and souvenir hunters. Only when we came along did time begin ticking again, each step we take stirring up the dust of 1,000 years. We owe much of our understanding of Roman life to Pompeii, and yet there's still so much to learn. It's humbling to stand amongst the ghosts of a bygone age, contemplating the fleeting nature of civilizations, no matter how powerful or well-established, and how quickly they can be swept away. Yet amid the sadness, there's a strange comfort in knowing that our stories, too, will one day be told. If we're lucky, our legacies will live on in the memories of those around us. And if we're very lucky, a Bronze Age archaeologist might one day unearth the remnants of our lives and wonder who we were, just as we marvel at the Pompeians who lived and died beneath the shadow of Vesuvius. What's your favorite artifact from Pompeii? Let us know in the comments below. And stay tuned for future episodes of Buried and Remembered.